par e tu non ti desti ed invano mi sto qui dolente a cantare.
Buongiorno amici tutti, and welcome to the Italian Hour on radio WNLC in New London, Connecticut. I'll be back in 60 seconds. Please stay tuned for more enchanting Italian music.
I've asked my mother why they left, and other than the obvious, to seek a better life, it was hard to imagine. When I got there, it was even more difficult to imagine that this uneducated young man would walk off that mountaintop speaking only one language and knowing no life other than what was inside that very small town, and walk to Messina and get on a boat to Naples, and then from Naples to the United States. Boy, it was just hard to conceive what would drive a man to do that, and a man who now was married, leaving an expectant mother at home, leaving an expectant wife at home.
Exactly when my mother and dad came to this country, I'm not too certain. I can just surmise that it was in the very, oh gosh, it must have been in the late 1800s, because what I recall is that they both made reference to the fact that Tusa at that time was a very, very difficult time. There was a failure of crops, and unemployment was very, very high, and I think that was one of the determining factors that got them to come to the United States.
My name really I come from Ascoli from Italy. Come from nice about Italy too, but I mean, I just want to get out of see different country.
I was born in Mondolfo, province of Pesaro, in the Marques. Now, 2 months after I was born, my father left for the United States. He was more or less an anti-government thinker. Now, when I came over in 1920, he was already in New London. In August, my ship was to leave from Genoa. The name of the ship was Dante Alighieri. It was quite a voyage across the Atlantic, and we arrived in New York. Of course, in New York, we were quarantined for about 3 days. Of course, the first class people were off first. They got off the boat first, and then the second class, and then the third class. We were in the third class.
Yes, Ellis Island. We were detained there for 3 days. They gave us a bald haircut, you know, because there was lice. In those days, there was a lot of that. So they cleaned you up before you entered the country, before they let you out of Ellis Island. And so my brother and I had clean-shaven heads.
If you were under 21, you had to have some kind of a sponsor or somebody here waiting to accept you. And my father came alone. My mother didn't, and most Italians didn't. They came in groups or in families, but my father came all by himself. And he was not 21 years old. As a matter of fact, he was a teenager. And when he came to Ellis Island, his sponsor wasn't there to accept him. And they detained him. And I don't know how true it is, that is on the part of the U.S. Customs officials, but they threatened to send them back. I really don't know what the, and of course it frightened my father because he didn't want to go back. And personally, I don't think they would have sent him back because who was going to pay for his passage back? And one of the customs agents was Italian, and he lived in New Rochelle on the mainland, and he overheard what was going on, and he came to my father and he says, I might be able to get somebody to sponsor you. And he did. He came forward, but 2 or 3 days later, he came to Ellis Island with this fellow, and the guy told my father, he said, look, I'm only here to get you on the mainland. I can't afford to support you, so I don't think you're going to stay with me, but I just want to vouch for you, and I'll sign for you and sponsor you. So he got my father ashore, and my father didn't live with him. He thanked him very much. I think he had a couple of meals there, but he slept about a block away from him over a bakery in an empty room. And that's how he got ashore.
I left Italy when I was a young kid. And I saw my father the second time, because he was away 19 years. When he came, I was little. I could remember him. So when I left Italy, my mother gave me a picture of my father. She said, when you go to New York, look at the picture and look at your father. So I don't want you to get mixed up. So when I get off of the boat, I look at my father and I look at the picture. I said, gee, this looks like my father. So my father came in and said to me, Mary, I'm your father. And, you know, we both started to cry.
When my mother came here after she got married, she didn't want to be here. She wanted to go back. She really wanted to go back. She cried, she wrote letters, she called. And in Italy, they would tell her, you know, Antonetta, you're married now, you got to stay there. You know, you have a new life. But, and my father said, you know, if you want to go back and visit, go back and visit. But that's when we used to go back every summer. But she was very homesick.
Con l'aereo, venimmo con l'aereo dell'Italia, della Sicilia. Sicilia, Roma, Roma, New York.
New York?
New York, no London.
Day after we departed, our family was waiting there. My mom's family was waiting there and take us to the right destination, which at this point we're very happy.
Yeah.
We were ready to start our new life.
My grandfather would invite us to a grape time, to squeezing the grapes. You heard of people barefoot, but I used to do that for my grandfather. He would have all his grandchildren go there, they could wash their feet good, and put us in a room like this, made of cement. And they tore all the grapes in there, and we used to squeeze them for them with our feet, and to drain into the pool where the wine went. And I used to do that. Not professionally for money, but I used to go down and help grandfather. Then, across the street from my house, there was a mill. And the mill was to squeeze, not grapes now olives. You know. And everybody used to come in across the street from my house. I walk over there and I watch them. A little donkey would go around with this big stone, and they throw the olives in there, and they would squash them, squeeze them. It would drain from the pipe into this big bin. They used to scoop the first batch of oil at the top, would float on top. That's #1 grade. Maybe they were down this deep, all pure olive.
My mother was traditional Southern lady. She grew up on a farm in a small village, and we did a lot of things at the house that, at the time growing up, I didn't think were normal American things to do. The backyard was an entire garden, over 100 tomato plants, green beans, you name it. And I always used to say to her, "Mom, can we have some grass in the backyard? I want some grass to go out and play." And she'd always say, "Well, what are you going to eat? You going to eat the grass? I can't can the grass."
This garden is located at 288 Coleman Street in New London, Connecticut. It belongs to the Rocco family. It was started by Mrs. Rocco's father, Mr. Luciano Lombardi, in 1930. And in the second row, I grow a variety which I named the Harkness variety, because originally the seeds came from the Harkness Gardens in Waterford. A friend of ours who was a gardener there, Mr. Mariani, gave the seeds to my mother many years ago, and we've continued to propagate them and remake the seeds every year.
It was very interesting at the Harkness estate because almost 100% the employees were all Italian. The Marianis, the Capozas, the Michellis.
My father had a knack for grafting, and he grafted fruit trees. And there are still a lot of trees in New London that he has grafted. And he would graft fruit trees such as a pear tree, have Bartlett pears on one side and Bosc growing out of the other side of the trunk of the tree. Or he would take an apple tree, an old crabapple trunk, and graft Golden Delicious on this side of the trunk and Red Delicious on the other, and have an apple tree bear two different types of apples.
I remember a woman writing to Italy telling her, "Come on here because Shaw Street's just like home. You won't be lonesome," she said, because they all congregated in one district.
Well, it was good because there was all Italians, and if you didn't know how to speak very good, you know, and it was nice.
People in Crystal Avenue, they was wonderful. There was Miss Damino, Mrs. Damino, there was Miss Payne. This was all Italian people. We used to all live near there. Oh, we used to get together every afternoon, one in each place. We used to have a coffee, we used to take care of the kids. We used, in the summertime, we used to get all together and take the kids to the beach. But we don't have enough money. We used to say to the kids, "Don't ask for ice cream." Because those days, you can say you get an ice cream, each one, you can do it. So we used to either cook macaroni or, sandwich, things like this, and they enjoy. So, but I think today we got everything. But years ago, the life was better, it was more ease, and more respect, and more comfortable. Today, we used to leave the door open. We never closed the doors, never. Everybody come in, they open the door.
Down around Bank Street area,
right.
From Bank Street up around Hamilton Avenue, we were all Neapolitans,
Right.
In fact, there was more or less just about 3 families. It was the Strauzos, the Santangelos, and the Scarpas, and the Patrizis. These were the families. In fact, they took over practically all of the street. And then we had the Sicilians that went down a couple of streets, and then we had the people from Fano, Italy, the forts they were.
I remember my cousin Peter Strauza. He came home with a girl one time, and she was Sicilian. Why, God almighty, you'd have thought he brought home a cannibal or something. And, God, he had to break up with her. And so finally, he met another girl, and he married her, and she turned out to be half Sicilian and half Irish.
Yeah, in Shaw Street, I don't think there was anything to be afraid of. You had to be afraid of Shaw Street people if you were there to do harm, because they wouldn't let you do it. You know, and the Italian neighborhoods are very clannish, and if you got no business there, you better get out of there. They don't fool around. Well, I'll give you a case in front of Pippi's, and a little black boy, Cortland Hall, was leaning against a car. Belonged to a sailor. He was a redneck from the South. When he came out, he started calling him obscene names, and he called him a few other names that were, and the 3 or 4 of the big Shaw Street guys were standing there. They say, hey, what are you doing talking to this is one of our neighborhood kids here. What do you get? Him? He's, you know, and they called him all the names. He says, oh, no, he's one of our kids. So the respect there was, we didn't care what family you were part of Shaw Street. If we want to talk about Shaw Street, that was our prerogative. But don't you talk about Shaw Street, or don't talk about our family. And the whole family had like 23 kids, I guess, in that one family. And so they had a fight. They wrecked them, sailors, threw them in the car. They came back the next night to Pippi's with 3 carloads. They wrecked the whole 3 carloads and put them in the car. A couple of them went to the hospital, and they went on their way, never came back again. And they say, you couldn't do that. Shaw Street was Shaw Street. They were ours. The flag the fascists have, it said on it, a noi, ours. That was all it said on that flag, okay? Right? Ours. And that was the whole thing to it.
Going up, we had a man, Mr. Ware, and he was either West Indian, part Indian, and you know, American Indian, I think. He was a great ball player. Played for the plant team at Mercer Field, and he loved to play baseball with the kids, and he was always playing pepper with them in the yard. He had a big yard where, when he moved out of there, the Messina family moved in, and he had a big yard there, and he used to work for the Hood, I think it was the Hood Ice Cream Company, and always make sure he had extra ice cream at the bottom of the, you know, the cartons that they had. And all the kids used to convene on his lawn and eat ice cream, you know, and it was really a lot of fun. And next to them were the Castagnas and the Veveritos, and next to them was Doc Dyer. He lived on the corner. Coming down the street, Bertie was on the corner. John Bosco lived in the house there, and then he had different families that he rented to. I think the Maynards lived there for a while. And then coming down, you had the Granadas next door to him, and Mrs. Granada, and then you had Raganese. Raganese saved my life.
We rented from Rosie Chevalier. She owned houses up in that little section where I live, and she owned a grocery store that we shopped at all the time. And I remember they would have a running account for a week, and my mother would have her little book, and Rosie would have her big book, and we'd go down 25 cents, and then at the end of the week they'd add it up and pay off their debts and start all over again. That's the way they shopped. And of course it wasn't like a big supermarket. I mean, you know, you went down for a steak, and Rosie would take the piece of beef out and just cut the steak off herself and give it to you. Oh, I remember the day that Pearl Harbor was bombed. We were down the hall, and it came over the radio. And I remember that. Then I remember part of the fort being sold off. First it was Merchant Marine. Then it became University of Connecticut, and then it became the Soundland. That whole section of the fort more or less that's when they had to move out, and a lot of people moved away from the fort then, that one section there on that side of Smith Street.
No, it's just that, you know, the fort was a different place than 50s, 60s for me. It was a great place. You know, it was a terrific place to grow up.
Well, when you talk about football on Thanksgiving Day, it was the forts versus Shore Street. Everybody that lived on Shore Street, everybody lived in a fort, looked forward to Thanksgiving, not so much for the turkey, but for the game, or maybe both, you know. But
well, we had a bunch of kids that all hung around in the barber shop, you know. But they all hung around the barber shop, and they dressed in and everything else. And I started this football team, but you know what I mean? And we played every Thanksgiving Day. We played the Fort Trumbull team. They had a team. I had Pat Kennemel, All-American, playing on our team, you know. All of a sudden, they had kind of pros. They had Hank Ciccarelli that could throw a football to Groton from here. They were real good, you know. Right. And they beat us most of the time, you know. But we gave them We gave them quite a battle. We had, I had 3 all-state guys on my team. Mort Jeffers, a guy by the name of Mort Jeffers, Maish Levine, the Jewish fella, the insurance. Now these guys are all state. And the guy, quarterback, let me tell you, the quarterback was all state, but who do you think quarterbacked the team? My brother Jackie on economy was my team. The quarterback he wanted to play was halfback.
Now I was basically on the fort side of the perimeter, but I played for the Shore Street. I was playing for Shore Street.
Actually, I was a cheerleader for the fort. Every Thanksgiving, we went to the football game, which was a big thing.
I remember my brother when they were practicing, in the early days, they used to make shoulder pads out of cardboard. They used to get cardboard and pad up their shoulders make their own shoulder pads, because, you know, this is early days, you know. They didn't have the money to buy the equipment, but then later on in years, as it progressed, it got to be a big thing, and it got to be a big rival, and then they got these shoulder pads, I don't know, from different clubs.
It was always pretty close. They were both good teams, good friends. In the end, they were always good friends.
Well, those guys used to go out, and not kill. It was a rough game, yes, no question about it. But they would be eating together at their homes. You know? It was no problem where not half, but you know what I'm saying, 3 or 4 members of the fort would be eating at 3 or 4 members, not 4 members, but 1 member of the Fort Trumbull. I mean, they were related almost. But it was a great game. Everybody waited for it. It was a big event in New London. Everybody went to the game. That was Thanksgiving.
The one that won used to keep the trophy. The fort kept it down there, and when we won, we kept it in a barber shop. And I had it in a barber shop. We were shooting crap in the back room. Some guy from the fort came in and stole the damn trophy from me. You know what I'm trying to. But you know, there was nobody in there. Well, we were in there, but we were all in the back room. You know.
It wasn't a hall or something that you felt was something you go to. It was a second home. Everybody went over there, and it had the warmth of being a home.
If I hadn't become acquainted with the Italian people in this community through the Italian Mutual Aid Club down on Smith Street, I would have went crazy. I mean, of course I belonged to the PTAs and all the things that I had to do in the Scouts and everything the children had to do, but I missed the closeness of an Italian community.
Oh, this was a big deal for me because I was able to go to these meetings because it was an Italian club. Mary Romano, and I think Dr. Stati was involved in this too. They started the Boys Club. It was Dr. Liacano. They were all involved in this. The Junior Gloria Lodge, and Gloria and the girls were the Gloria Lodge, and the boys were the Colombo Lodge.
The old-timers started building this club in 1918, and they finished in 1920. They did all the work themselves, and they did it part-time. They didn't have too much money, so they were working themselves. After coming home from the job, they used to come in and work, and then do what they could. And when they had more lumber, they kept going little by little, till they completed it. And they ran dances, all kind of dances every week, to keep the club going till they started building up the treasury. Families, you had Morris Cardisi, you had Catucci. Mr. Catucci was a carpenter. You had Severini's, he was a carpenter. You had Macusi, Chancho Macusi, he was a mason. You had Piverini, he was a mason. They had all kind of trades in there. They had Luma Dorsey, they had Centa Scudi, they had Broccoli. They had a big gang of their own. And they worked all every time on Saturdays, Sundays, and nights to complete the club. They did their own plastering and everything. As the old timers got older, everything was changing. See? And that's about the only thing. That's why you had 2 organizations. There was no difference at all. They all worked together. They all worked with Benvenuti, most of them. And they all worked together and everything, just in the evening. One would go to that club and the others would come to this club, but there was never no arguments or nothing between each club. They were all good friends. The Italian Society Club.
It's called the Little Hall because it was set lower than the other one. In other words, one is here, and the other one was like, if you went around the hill, it goes up in the back like that. Right. Into a, you know, so they said that was built higher. That's why they called the other one the Little Hall, because it was down lower.
Well, they had women, and we didn't have women. Ours was always a men's club.
Our club was the one that, you know, we would go to church, and they always celebrated like May Day and 1st of May. And
they were very more church-oriented, yeah. They were. And only here was a woman that went to church, but the men never bothered.
They were different. But we still, you know, mingled with them and all. It's just, I really didn't get into it. I knew that they didn't go to church or we did.
Well, pleasure history goes way back when the old timers came from Italy. They believed in God and all that, but they didn't believe in the church. Because when they first came from Italy, the priests used to ride around with a horse and wagon. And the old timers never believed in that, because in Italy, the priests used to walk side by side with them. So they used to pray at home. They never bothered with going to church.
The Tusana Society, you know, it was very interesting. I was just a little kid when, you know, they were planning to build the Tusana Hall. There were many people involved, but the one guy who was really the spearhead behind it was Francesco Piscatella, who had several sons and daughters, and he died before it was actually completed, but he was the driving force, or one of the people. But they all had a very strong feeling towards doing this, and they all pitched in. They either worked on it, or they contributed supplies for the building, or if they couldn't work on it, they contributed money if they could afford it. But it was interesting that they wanted to perpetuate the name Tusana, and they wanted us, their progeny, to know where we came from and who we were, and to have something that we could link to the past.
There was a little square there they called Garibaldi Square, and in the summertime all the Italians would play bocce, baseball, talk, whatever, and most of them were Tusanis. Now they wanted to help each other, so they built Tusana Hall, their own club, and they built it with their own hands. It took them 3 or 4 years. They dedicated in 1936, but they were all in their 30s by then, you know. Well, by 1960, they were dying off, and we couldn't get any members to join. I happened to be one of the guys that did join as a young fella, and I was the last president for 3 years. And I could see we were failing, and I had a chance to merge with the Sons of Italy. And I made these stipulations in the agreement, and they agreed. One was they had to change the name from Order Sons of Italy to Tusana Columbus Lodge. They had to put the name Tusana. That stays on there. The other thing was that they had to give us a dinner every year in honor of the remaining members. I've had a free dinner, and my wife and I, for the last, since 1960.
At the time, there was a Sicilian club in town called the Tusana Club, and my father couldn't join that because he was not of that region. And I'm sure they might have had a Calabrese club somewhere in the neighborhoods around here, in the areas of southeastern Connecticut. He wasn't Calabrese. And of course, the Fanese had 2 clubs down the fort, and he couldn't join there because he was not Marchigian. So the Central Italians started their own club, and it was on Division Street, which is off of Bank Street, and it was a house that they bought and renovated it, and they called it Circolo dell'Amici, and it means Circle of Friends. And the members, I can still mention some members' names, were people like Fosconi, Quintiliani, Bottinelli, the monument man up on Broad Street, and Morsicatas, DiBiase's, and those people. Mariani, Dr. Mariani's father, and those family, people, they were all members, and it was quite they used to have social events. And that was really the only place my mother, went out with my father was to something like that, or visiting our relatives. And it was sort of a mutual aid society among themselves, too.
When we were little, when I was little, my father and mother would take us down there, they'd have dances, and us little kids would fall asleep on the chairs, because they didn't have babysitters then. And then they had good times. They rented the hall out and cooked for different people, different organizations. And we would help our parents cook. We'd help clean the chickens and peel the potatoes and help make the sauce. We'd serve. Then they had good times for themselves, dances, and sometimes they would cook, sometimes it was just dances. When people got sick, they helped them out, and then if people died, they had a death benefit for them. I remember another thing down the hall that they did a lot was they roasted a pig, and they called it purketa, right? And I remember my father doing that. They'd get this large pig, and it would be slaughtered, and then they'd take it down the hall, and they would dress it, season it, dressing it, and they had a huge oven down there, brick oven, and they'd have to build a fire up and get it hot like days ahead of time. And they put the pig in there, and they would turn it with the spigot. It would take about almost a day to cook it. Then when it was cooked, they had this game they called tombola, and it was like 3 cards were sewed on a piece of string, and then something like a bingo. And then a man would come and he'd call the numbers out, and you'd turn them over, and if you won, then you would win maybe a pound of the pork. But the thing that I remember most is that the night when they slaughtered the pig, they would save the blood from the pig, and they would cook the blood the night before, and all the Italian old folks would sit around and they would eat the blood of the pig, and they enjoyed it. I never participated in that.
The Dante Alighieri Society, it's a very old organization, starting way back in the 1800s, in the early 1800s, maybe even before that. An organization devoted to the promotion and perpetuation of Italian art, language, and culture. The local chapter here has been in existence for many years. We have a wonderful program, including the teaching of the Italian language and the perpetuation of the art and culture.
The hall and the club that I remember most, that we had time and time again events, family functions, and so on and so forth, was Tusa Hall on Moore Avenue. There were weddings going on. There was a bocce court in the back, and I would always walk in there, and you would walk downstairs, and the older men would be cooking. And when I was younger, I would look at them, and they'd be walking around with their aprons, and the food would smell wonderful. But there was one thing I would always I always thought, and that was, they're all talking in Italian, this language, that I wasn't totally familiar, because of course back then my parents wanted us to speak English. So these people were talking Italian, and I always thought, being as young as I was, that, geez, I can't wait till I get older like that and I can talk like that too.
But no, I don't know how we came about it, but I know we had quite a committee. Yeah, you saw this book that I had here. Yeah. No, he was civic-minded, and he wanted the Italians to be represented in New London by that statue, and that was his pride and joy.
And they had a parade that was outstanding, all the way down State Street, all the way down Bank Street, and they had and then at night they had a celebration at Woodland Grove, and they had the fireworks.
I remember marching in the parade when they dedicated the Columbus statue on Bank Street in 1928, and I think it was in October 12th or thereabouts. And I was going to Harbor School, and a bunch of Italian kids marched in a parade. It ended up October 12th, a very, very hot day. So hot that when the parade was going up Broad Street, one man passed out and died. That's how hot it was. But I remember that because it was the talk of the town. And it was quite a sight when they pulled the string and took the veil off that statue. And it looks the same today as it did way back in 1928.
Goes to humanity itself.
While I was in grammar school, I didn't want to join, they'd force you to join. They had a group for the 6th graders to join the fascists, they called it the youth, fascistic. And then the older group, and so on and so on. They had fascists all over Italy. They were forced, you were forced to join them. We didn't want to, but I was a fascistic.
Yeah.
It just came to power in 1920 and 22 in that area. So I'm just leaving there. I left as fascistic.
Mussolini, not very good man, I'll tell you. You know, I had a friend, he died a year ago last month. He saw Mussolini hanging in a gas station in Milan. They used to throw rocks at him after they killed him. And his woman friend, they were hanging in a gas station, spitting at him and everything. Yeah, no use for him. He was no good.
Now, the southern Italian people, the Sicilians, Neapolitans, generally were pro-Mussolini. The opposite, generally, was anti-fascist, anti-Mussolini. The fort people. They were from the north and the others were from the south. The statue of Columbus over here from Italy, it was a general Italian holiday. There was wind, or they heard this fascist was going to march in this parade. And evidently these people down the fort, they decided this here, as far as I know. And I think I know it pretty good. Of course they had clubs, you know, they were armed. They were going to bang the hell out of them, you know what I mean? One guy had a car, he says, I'll go up Shore Street. Another guy had a car, you come down Shore Street. I'll come down Stewart Street and Denison Avenue and those streets there, and we'll all meet there at the clubhouse of the fascists. Of course, the clubhouse was in the back of the building. So they decided that we'd be there waiting for them as they came out of the building, from the back of the building. So one guy comes out and they started hitting him, banging him on. Another one comes out, bang, bang. And as they were coming out, they got banged with this anti-fascist group.
Dr. Sadai needed voters, and he said, you know, if we could get those people in the fort to become voters, we could take this, we could win whatever election was going on at the time. So he asked Gay Callahan, who was a very good friend of mine, she's recently deceased, if we would go into the fort and make voters. The only way you can make voters is, with Italian people at least, is personal, face-to-face contact. A phone call doesn't mean anything to them. You know, you have to meet them face-to-face. Okay, so we will. So we went, and we went from house to house, praising Dr. Sadai. He must have been running for election on someone that he wanted nominated or elected. And the worst thing you could do is refuse a cup of coffee or a glass of wine in any Italian house at that time, not today, of course, but in those days, you always had to have something to drink. And they would pour us a little bit of wine. I think Gay and I got real happy that day making voters, and we did. We made quite a few voters.
But the political scenario in London is Washington was a chief aide to Saadi. And when in the failing years for Saadi, and when he finally succumbed, Washington took over. And we had Washington had a good base here because he had the Italians that were under Saadi, and now being Jewish, he had a good base of Jewish voters, and they were productive. The Jewish voters and the Italian voters got out. See, and that changed and made the Democrats stronger.
Politically, I became a Democrat. Dr. Sarai called me in one day and says, "I want to run for office?" I says, "No." He says, "Why don't you want to run for political office?" I says, "Because you're going to run the show, and everybody else is going to be pushed around." I could speak to Dr. Sarai. But I didn't get particularly involved in political life as such. I did a job which was treasurer. I thought that was adequate. I was treasurer for about 45 years. Didn't steal a dime.
I remember my activity in the Republican Party. I remember one time that there was a vacancy in the 5th Ward, and I went to the chairman of my ward and said, "I'd like to be considered for that spot." And when it comes up Tuesday night, I know you have others that might be more desirable. If so, if they're more deserving, you should appoint them. A fellow was sitting in the office next to my ward chairman and said to him, "Go on, we got too goddamn many wops on the town committee already." I stood there shocked, in silence for about 10, 15 seconds. And I said to the ward chairman, 10, 15 seconds ago, I asked for consideration. Now I demand that spot. No one's going to tell me I can't have a position or can't be recognized because of my heritage. Well, following Tuesday night, I wasn't selected. And next day, Fred Benvenuti came to me, and as many others did, and we formulated the first primary in the state of Connecticut. We waged a primary, and there were 640 voters in the 5th Ward, 640 Republican voters. I visited every one of the 640. And it was really an exciting time, and we won the entire slate. We beat the incumbents by about 40 votes right across the board. As a result of that, I became a Republican town chairman, and that led to my career as a politician and my appointment to the bench.
I had this Italian American Progressive Club, this gang there, and I wasn't getting along with the politicians in New London. They weren't giving me no action, you know. No kids got a job, no nothing, you know what I mean? We'd take care of you, Pete. I was going to take the 4th Ward over. I was going to be President Kennedy I was going to get my cousin Pippi in there. He went over and he told Dr. Sarai, "Look, Pete's going to take the 4th Ward over." So Dr. Sarai came in the barber shop. He says, "Pete, I mean, what are you doing? You're going to take the 4th Ward over, you know? You're too young for this stuff here. You know, just go along with me." So we went along with that. But getting back to the club, with Norman Thomas, he was a socialist mayor of Bridgeport. And what I was going to do was more like a communistic gang that I had, you know. We weren't actually going to kill nobody, but we wanted socialists. You know, the hell with Democrats and the heck with the Republicans, you know what I mean? So I had 280 members, you know what I mean? And so I went to Saturday, "Look, we got a lot of power here, you know." He talked about everything.
A lot of people came from Italy weren't religious. It's a strange thing. You have the Pope coming from Italy, but many of them were atheists. Really? Until they came here, and then that's how come you have a lot of Italians who are Protestants. They wanted to join the country and become part of the community, and they would choose a different religion.
The only thing I heard as a kid, and I'm talking about when I was 12 or 13, that these anarchists, and I understand they didn't believe in the church because of some of the goings-on that took place in Italy. What they were, I don't know. But the mothers had the fear of God in them, I guess, and one Sunday they would take the baby to, say, New Haven. They'd tell their husband they were going down to visit their sister or something. They'd take the baby and have it baptized down there. Next Sunday or 2 Sundays later, the father said he was going to take the baby to Norwich to see his brother or his cousin or something, and the baby would be baptized up there. So these kids whose parents supposedly didn't believe in the church had their kids baptized twice.
One of the things that was lacking was that we didn't have Italian priests at the time, and every once in a while they might bring an Italian priest to give a homily or say the Mass in Italian. or in the homily and so forth, and they might hear confessions in Italian. So that was good. But you know, if you didn't understand the language, a lot of these people didn't go to church because they didn't understand the English language. But one of the things that they did have, which was the Catholic Church at that time did, which made it palatable, let's say, for them to come to church, was that they said the Mass in Latin. So, and that was what the Latin Mass really, I think, what it was all about, is that no matter where you were in the world, you could go to church and the Mass was said in Latin and everybody knew the Latin, at least for the Mass. So that was good, but it would have been, it would have, I think, had a better, how shall I say it, the relationship of the Italian family with the church in New London at the turn of the century and up through the 20s and 30s, I think would have been a better family relationship had we had an Italian priest, or at least somebody who spoke and could communicate in Italian.
Pensiamo a quel lontano 1930. Vostre mamme, I vostri papà, che iniziarono questa festa dall'Assunto. E stasera è una sera anche di ricordi, di richiami e di memorie. Ho detto e ripeto che la festa dell'Assunta a New London non è la festa dei solo tusani, tanto meno dei calabresi, tanto meno dei napoletani, tanto meno degli abruzzesi, tanto meno dei calabresi, è la festa di tutti noi. Now friends, think for a moment the thought passed through my mind yesterday as I was jotting down these few words. How many eyes, how many hearts, how many lives, how many of your forefathers turned to this venerated statue of Our Lady in these past 68 years, asking for help, asking for blessing, asking for increased faith, asking for renewed devotion.
We just grew up and went to work. There you go. And when you got a job, you were thrilled that you got a job, and you didn't know whether it was right for you or not. You got a job and you stayed with it, and that was it.
You know, I was mayor of the city in 1965. And the day that I was sworn in as mayor, I was going to be sworn in that Monday night, Judge Trollin called me from the Superior Court, asked me to come over to his office. And I was a young lawyer. I was scared to death. What's Judge Trollin calling me? What did they do wrong? Sat me down, and he said, I understand your grandfather was Frank Pescatello. I said, yes, Your Honor. And he opened up his desk drawer, and he pulled out a piece of paper. The piece of paper was a news clipping about a talk that Judge Trollin gave to the Municipal Employees Association in 1945. And the subject of his talk was dedication to your job and pride in what you do. And no matter what your job is, you do it well, because that bespeaks the type of person you are. And he used as an example the greatest city worker that he ever knew, Frank Pescatello, known as Frank State Street. And he went on to tell about how Frank State Street was a street sweeper, but he was the most respected man in the Public Works Department because he did his job, he did it well, he took pride in what he did because he saw the world saw him through his job. The world saw him through his performance in public. Everybody knew him as Frank State Street. They tell a story about old Dr. Gainey was the last man to have a horse and buggy, and my grandfather hated it because the horse dumped on the street. That was the last horse he had to clean up after. But I that left a real impression on me. Judge Trollin thinking, remembering my grandfather, and in 1945, this is 20 years before, he spoke to the Public Works Association about having pride in your work. And he said, let me tell you about this guy who was a street sweeper. That was my grandfather.
Well, my father made friends down, and he made one friend that told him that there was a lot of work up here, and there was a quarry. And it turned out it was Millstone Quarry.
Okay.
So
that's how we got to New London.
Yeah, well, they got here on an old motorcycle with a sidecar. Now, these were two adventurous boys, and they came to Millstone to work. And I don't know what happened to the other fellow, but my father got a job there as a tool passer. And what he would do is, he would take the drills after they were sharpened, put them in a burlap bag, and climb down into the pits and bring them to the drillers and the cutters or whoever they were. And then he would pick up the dull ones, put them in the sack, and climb back up to the top where the sheds were, where they sharpened them. And he left there only because nobody talked English. Everybody talked Italian, and he said, I came over to this country to become an American, and I want to learn how to speak English. So he said, I got to get the hell out of this place.
Well, my dad, of course, was illiterate, really, could not write or speak English. Eventually, he went on to work at the Harkness estate, which was more to his liking because it was what he really loved. He loved the flowers, he loved the gardening and so forth. He would ride a bike in order to get back and forth to work. And it was a good 5 miles from Grand Street, I think. And every morning he would get up very early and have his breakfast, which consisted of sometimes of a raw egg and a glass of red wine. Ride his bike all the way to Harkness Estate and then come back.
Well, my father started in a small room where we lived. Well, that was located on Smith Street, 31, G. Filippetti. And then, of course, they decided to build, and they raised the house, and my father built a store underneath.
You know, I could read Italian in them days. I could read it. I know my husband used to take the order. I know what it said.
Because we wrote everything in Italian.
I know, I could read it them days.
My father started with a horse and wagon. I remember coming over to Groton when he delivered with him. And then, of course, you know, we sort of got bigger, and we had trucks going. My brother, I think then, I forget if you had to be 18 to get a driver's license. And when he became 18, we got the trucks. So he could deliver. We got rid of the horse and wagon.
I used to go to work at 8 o'clock in the morning, and I grabbed my godfather's fruit store, Louis Gaetano, on State Street, right by the railroad, where the Town Talk restaurant is, where the Captain's Pizza comes out now. And he was a short, stocky man. I used to go in and help him pick up the fruit, you know, set the fruit up. I mean, when you went to his store, you bought 2 apples, 2 pears, and fishes out in big business. Those people call, Mr. Gaetano, Louis, we want 7 pears, 8 apples, 3 oranges, and brother, there wasn't a mark on those things. I send things back like Steinman used to send things. He's come get these things and get them back out of here. We took nothing but the best. And he paid for it. So I worked there until 10 o'clock. So 10 o'clock, the store was all set, all swept up. Then I used to be outside shining shoes. Shine till about 4:30. Then I used to take the orange crates, break them up, and take them to Star Street, where he lived. This was kindling wood for him, for his furnace. I did that, come back, okay, had my supper, another grinder. Then I went to Simpson's Bowling Alley and set up pins until midnight. And this was my summer schedule.
I lived on Willits Avenue, which was the back of Mercer Field. In those days, Mercer Field was a great ball field. They had big games, a lot of people going there. And it was a lady who happened to be Billy Gardner, the ball player's grandmother. You know, Billy Gardner was a famous ball player. And she had a concession to sell peanuts and candy, and she had a couple of kids hawking her on the bleachers. And I asked for a job. I was, I think, 8.5 years old. She said, "No, I'm sorry." She said, "The other two kids, I got enough, you know." Well, it so happened these two boys had to go to the Boy Scout camp. And she saw me one day. She said, "You want a job? You can work now." So she gave me the basket with peanuts and candy, and I went to the bleachers, and I was getting 10%. So if I sold $10 worth of stuff, I'd make $1. And on a Sunday, sometimes I make $30 worth of stuff, and I'd come home with $3. And my father, "Oh, you made more money than I make. I have to work all day, only a couple hours, you know."
Oh, I worked on the streetcars first, see? You know, trolleys. I started with them in 1929. Yeah. Got the job through Johnny Montesi. He used to live in my father's house. And I liked it. I liked it. I was only 21 years old and running streetcars. I had a hell of a nerve to even start. Yeah, because they were big, you know. But I was a motorman, and I wouldn't want to be a conductor. And oh boy, during the war did I work. Oh boy. You know, during the war, what you got? 3 gallons of gasoline a week. Not a day, 1 week. So where the hell were you going to go? You had to ride a bus.
The steps of the Arboretum were made by one of the Tusanas. They could not get, they had a team of men up there trying to make the steps for the Arboretum, the grass steps, and they could never do it. They had about 4 or 5 men. So the doctor who was in charge, who went to the New York Botanical Gardens, asked Giuseppe Michelli, Mary Romano's father, said, "Mr. Michelli, would you help me out? Do you know anything?" He says, "If you leave me alone, then I'll make the steps." By hand, he made all those steps that went down into the Arboretum. He's got a mirrorstone with his initials on it up there, Giuseppe Michelli.
We had so many cousins and relatives and close friends that we had. It was a very large family. And you know, when you were in town and you walked around, every time you turned around, you were talking to a cousin. It seemed like, gee, you know, it never ends. And our custom, of course, is to, when you see somebody and and they're relative, you stop and you kiss them. I mean, that's. And when you know, it was always that when you left the house, you kissed your family, and when you came home, you kissed them. And that was a nice tradition. It was something that, you know, you thought about at the time, and you would wonder whether it was important. Why are we doing all of this? And I remember walking down State Street one day, and I ran into one cousin, and I ran into another. Of course, you stop and you kiss them. The person I was with said, "Are they all cousins? You have to kiss them all?" You know, and I thought, well, maybe I don't have to kiss them all. I was a little bit intimidated, so we were walking along, and I met another cousin with a friend, and instead of kissing them, I said, "Hello, how are you?" And I was happy to see them, asked how they were, and so forth, but I didn't kiss them. Well, when I got home, my mother said to me, "Well, why did you slight so-and-so?" She said, "Why were you so rude to her?" And I said, "Gee, what did I do?" She said, "Well, you didn't kiss her." And I said, "Well," I said, "Well, I'll never do that again." So now if they're good friends, I kiss them. You know?
I think the Italians have very emotional. We kiss our men. You understand? In respect, it's all respect. All your relatives, they kiss. They hug. They shake hands, they pat on the back, they were very emotional.
Listen, you're Italian, but first you're an American. Then you're Italian. Your heritage. So people would say to me, "What are you?" I'm American, right? I was born and raised in this country.
To the man, they all love this country, every one of them. They came here for a new life, they worked their heads off, and they love this country. I know my father did.
But Roosevelt was a great man.
Was he a great man?
Oh, yes. He was a great man. Yep. Yep. He put this country on its feet.
I went to Harvard School. I was a guinea from before. I was ashamed of being a guinea from before. There for a while. And people asked me where I lived. I'd say Goshen Street. They didn't know where that was. I wouldn't say before. Because Harvard School took care of all of Ocean Beach area, all of the other people. And I'm sorry, there was a lot of animosity, and I didn't like being called a guinea from before.
I learned a lot from the immigrants. I learned a lot from the people who maybe weren't formally educated about life. They enjoyed their families. They appreciated things day to day, enjoyed good food. They loved each other, they cared. They were almost geniuses. And that's where I hope to be when I grow up.
Che ven sulla montagna e guarda ben che non si bagni, te lo voglio regalare, guarda ben che non si bagni, te lo voglio regalare. That was one of our old favorites.
Bambinello del mio amore, ti ringrazio te, Signore. Bambinello dell'amore mia, ti ringrazio, eterno Dio. We used to sing all of those things.
Well, you're going to hear a very solid voice here, but it went something like this. La da da, 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 la da. La da da, 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 la 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 la la, la da da, la da. Few sour notes in there, but that's approximately how it went.
Ciao, ciao bambina, un bacio ancora, e poi per sempre ti perderò come una fiaba, parole passa, una volta, poi non c'è più. Cose che trema sotto vicino e poi c'è pianto, dimmi cose vuoi da dare. Parole passa, ma piove, piove sul nostro amore.